Hello, I'm Isambard Montague III, and you must be here to see that young peasant oik, Lawn Boys post 1975. Yes, pleasant chap, but common as muck. Anyway, enjoy his video, and then stop lying around, and get back on your horse and cart and get a bloody job.
Lawn Boys post 1975. YouTubers on the rise, reviewing games late at night and sometimes friends. But Lawn Boys post 1975.
Hey YouTube, Lawn Boys Post 1975. It's been a little bit sort of serious around my neck of the woods lately, so I thought I'd get a little bit more light-hearted and get back to sort of a video game related question. So I want to talk about failed systems, but I don't want to talk about what is necessarily your favourite failed system. I want to ask a slightly different question. But before we get to the question, I want to talk about what is a failed system? A failed system that, whether it's because of poor execution, poor timing, insufficient marketing, other reasons, is something that's absolutely tanked, an absolute train wreck of a system. You know, in and out of stores, usually under a year. Systems that come to mind are the 32X, the Mega CD, the CD32, Philips CDI, 7800, 5200, Amstrad GX4000. Oh, and the Virtual Boy, probably one of the most famous failed systems of them all. Now, I need to draw a distinction here, because I think there's a difference between a failed system and an unsuccessful system. Now this, you might think, what? Well, basically, if you talk about the Sega Saturn and the Sega Dreamcast, most people, most gamers won't really consider them failed systems, but from Sega's perspective, they are. They lost money on them. You know, they did not achieve what they set out to achieve, and they lost a lot of money, so Sega considers them failed systems. Obviously, Dreamcast is the reason Sega pulled out of the market altogether. I consider them unsuccessful systems, and by that I mean, if you owned one of these systems, you weren't properly pooch screwed. You know, they were around long enough, they had a lifespan, they had a game catalogue, you know, of a reasonable size, particularly the Dreamcast. So therefore, you bought them, you weren't screwed. You know, you got to enjoy the machines for, you know, a reasonable amount of time. So I think they're unsuccessful systems. The TurboGrafx, unsuccessful system. Not that one though, because that's the European one, so that's a failed system. So I think there is a difference, you know. Well, I mean, if you want to pick one of those as the answer to this question, by all means, you know, it's up to you to interpret it in any way you want to. So the reason I want to ask this question is, when you look at a failed system, apart from specific collectors and people who go after niche systems who will appreciate them for what they are, most people, when they look at something that's failed, just, you know, it's failed. It's the stigma of failure. It gets attached to something. You won't look at it and think of what it could achieve or what it could have achieved. You just go, it's failed. You know, that's the nature, isn't it? I mean, I bring football into this. I love football. I love the World Cup. I can remember every country that's ever won a World Cup. But if you ask me to name the country they beat to win so, I can't. Why? Because they lost. So I didn't bother remembering them. You know, that's just the nature of the stigma attached to failure. So my question to you is, of all the failed systems, which system would you have liked to have seen succeed or get a decent crack at the whip? Have a 4 to 5 year lifespan to see where it would have gone, you know, games wise, peripheral wise, you know, because obviously I say 4 to 5 years because games at the start of a system's life, when developers are fumbling around with the hardware and don't necessarily know what they're doing, are far removed from the end of its life, you know, sort of 4 or 5 years later, where they're completely comfortable and they're wringing the hardware for every ounce of power. I mean, you've only got to look at the games at the end of the Mega Drive and the SNES's life to say, if you went back and showed them to the person who just bought the system on day one, say, hey, look at this, they'd be like, wow, that's so far removed from anything I've seen. So, you know, 4 to 5 year lifespan, what system? Now, what I'm going to choose might surprise you because it's completely and utterly shaped by what I'm playing at the moment. And as you might probably know, all I'm playing at the moment, I'm properly caning the shit out of the PC Engine. Absolutely fantastic system. Why it took me this long to buy one, I don't know. And the TurboGrafx as well. Incredible system. I mean, first of all, I just have to say this, by the way. Chase HQ, balls hard. This is probably the hardest version of it I've played, and that goes for the arcade as well. But yeah, so the reason this has shaped my decision is, on paper, spec-wise, technically, the PC Engine isn't that impressive. It really isn't. If you just saw its statistics, you'd be like, meh. But when you actually play it, to anyone who owns one or has played one, you know that it's something very, very special, and very, very impressive, and personally I think definitely holds, you know, its own against the Mega Drive. So the system I would like to have seen where it went, and it's the definition of a failed system, is the Super Graphics, the successor to the original PC Engine. I mean, this absolutely is a train wreck, and I think a lot of the reasons it is a train wreck were because of it came too soon. It came too soon. It wasn't a big enough step up over the PC Engine. It came too soon. Now, PC Engine came out in 1987, was absolutely massive, loved by third parties, loved by the public. You know, it was incredibly successful. I mean, it's got such a massive library. So they started talking about the successor to it, and they wanted it to be 16-bit. It's going to come out in 1990. They actually got out for 1989, so it came out 2 years later than the PC Engine. This is why I think it probably tanked. Is when you've got a machine that successful, why do you feel the need to get the successor to it that, you know, that quickly, that soon in its life cycle? The only thing I can think of is NEC were running scared because obviously you're just around the corner with the 16-bit systems, but in hindsight they didn't need to be, because people didn't consider the Mega Drive that much of a step up from the PC Engine, regardless of the fact that the Mega Drive was 16-bit. They didn't care. They stuck with their PC Engine. So it turned out this 16-bit threat really, you know, sort of never materialised against the PC Engine. But anyway, NEC said we want to do a PC Engine 2 with the Super Graphics. It's going to be 16-bit. It wasn't. It had the same 8-bit CPU as the original PC Engine. Alright, it had 4 times as much RAM, and it also had an additional video chip and a separate chip to synchronize these two chips to control them together, because obviously, you know, additional hardware, it could always fight against each other. It's one of the reasons that the Saturn was the problem. They never programmed for the second processor in it. So this second chip allowed it to do 2 separate layers of independent background, or parallax, I guess, if you will, that the original PC Engine can only do 1. So that's technically what the Mega Drive could do. So does that mean that it was as powerful as the Mega Drive? Clearly it was, whether it was still 8-bit or not, was a little bit more powerful, because if you've, and you can see on YouTube, if anyone's seen Ghouls and Ghosts running on the PC Engine, I mean, this phrase gets chucked around a lot, it's an exact arcade port. It's incredibly impressive. It's probably the best version. Although, one thing I would like to point out, Super Graphics had the same audio capacity as the PC Engine, which to me was a mistake if it was supposed to be the successor, the superior machine, because as much as the sound is very, very good on the PC Engine, I would have to say if it had a weak link, it would be the sound. But that's just me, maybe you disagree. But so anyway, the Super Graphics came out. I think only 5 games were actually released for it that, you know, took advantage of its extra abilities. It was incredibly expensive, and people probably didn't, you know, feel the need to upgrade to it over the PC Engine. I guess the only thing that stopped it completely sucking if you bought one was it was fully backward compatible. So you did, you know, even though you never got any extra games other than these 5 that took advantage of its extra abilities, at least you didn't have a machine that you just sat there with 5 games gathering dust and you couldn't play. Although that's probably not sort of a defence for it, if you will. So why did I pick it? Well, as I said, on paper the PC Engine really isn't that impressive. But they did incredible things with it. So the Super Graphics, yes, it does have additional benefits over the original PC Engine. It's not this sort of massive step up. It should have been. But as I said, there's some incredible games on the PC Engine. So I just would have loved to have seen if they accepted the hardware, you know, they had before them, and just wrote games for it. I would love to have seen what they came up with. I really would have loved to. And of course, it was compatible with the CD unit from the PC Engine. So Super Graphics CD games, think about it. Could have been amazing. And as again I say, that you've got 5 years to play with the system. I think even though it wasn't the system it should have been, for whatever reasons it failed, if you put them aside, I personally would have really liked to have seen where it could have gone. Anyway, I'm waffling. Yeah, of all the failed systems that are out there, of all the failed systems, which one would you like to have seen succeed, you know, to have a reasonable lifespan, you know, to see where it could have gone and why? Anyway, I'll see you later.